Insulin resistance is the metabolic plague of the 21st century. It predicts heart disease 10 years before any of these things that we look at. And insulin resistance is treatable, preventable, reversible with diet, exercise, and fasting. Very often people ask questions that have a premise buried in them that's incorrect. Maybe it has nothing to do with what you think it does. What is the reason we've been told not to eat animal products? What is the reason we've been told not to eat saturated fat? If you looked at it, it was very clear that both of those instructions had been given for one reason. What we have been taught and what we've been conditioned to believe are the healthiest foods are very often, I would say 90%, utter and complete crap. What I will say about cholesterol, just to start the discussion, is that we're measuring it wrong. It's caused us to take our eye off the ball. So what is the ball?
So I'm here with Jonny Bowden, who is a famous author in my eyes, wrote a lot of very popular books, Great Cholesterol Myth, Living Low Carb. And before I get a little bit of background on how you got on into this in your life, I actually want to tell you that you got me into this and the passion and direction I've gone in my life.
Really?
So I say that, and I want to kind of highlight it because I was always in the nutrition, more of the bodybuilding background. Do you remember as a Dr. Colgan? I was reading his books, High Carb.
Michael Colgan? Oh
Yeah.
my God, of course. I grew up on that stuff.
Right. So I'm reading all his books and influenced me. Very similar to your story. I can't get results for people. And what worked for me as a young 20-year-old man was not working for others. And I opened a CrossFit gym, and some of the zone diet stuff was popular in the CrossFit community. And I was giving a nutrition presentation to our members, and I freaked out and dove deep down the rabbit hole. I happened to stumble upon your book somehow and got lucky. And this book, Living Low Carb, literally changed all my beliefs, introduced me to
Barry Sears, who wrote The Zone, of course, wrote the intro to that.
I know, and I just saw that, and I was telling my partner, my business partner and best friend, that it's pretty cool that you were a trainer and you saw him give a speech, and now you wrote a book and he's giving you the interest. That's pretty cool. And but it made a huge impact on me. We have since created a nutrition program, opened multiple gyms, and the philosophies that you taught me, and I would see you as a mentor to me, even though you never met me, has impacted thousands of people's lives. So it's pretty cool. So if I could, I think very similar to me, you're working with people not getting results, and you're asking better questions. And like you, I feel like that's what started your journey, isn't it?
Well, it started before that even got me into the field. It was a second career for me. But I can give you
okay.
if you're interested. But yes, you're absolutely right. Once I started in health and fitness, which was 1991, thereabouts, when Equinox opened their very, very first Equinox in Manhattan, it was definitely a progression that was fueled by asking better questions. And I've always maintained throughout my teaching career, my writing career, that learning how to ask the right questions is the key to getting better information. And I'm sure you've seen this a million times. Someone I ask you, well, what's the best way to get 60 grams of protein in one meal? And dude, you don't need 60 grams of protein. And it's the wrong question. So,
Right.
Asking, very often people ask questions that have a premise buried in them that's incorrect, right?
Yep.
How do I lower my cholesterol so I won't get a heart attack? Maybe it has nothing to do with what you think it does.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
I think it's very important to ask the right questions. I think I'm a big believer in critical thinking, something that we collectively saw as a country go out the window during COVID. But critical thinking is very important, and we don't teach it. Most people don't know how to do it. And it really starts with asking good questions.
Yeah, and I learned that lesson, I don't want to say the hard way, but your book humbled me because I just had an argument with someone almost to the death about how important carbs are and they're a primary source of fuel. And obviously we can get into that, but generally then reading your book and seeing the depth and asking the right questions and the right topics and the role of hormones and all these other things opened me up to a whole nother world. So yeah, I learned that lesson with your book. And I actually want to introduce our audience to some of the things that you introduced me to. You're probably maybe, I don't know if you're tired of talking about it or not, but I would love to review these.
I'm never tired of talking about it. I could talk about this stuff. I do talk about this stuff all day long.
So I want to get into, I would like to start with the cholesterol myth.
Okay.
That is, a big one of your, top selling books. And what I really want to get into is, I think one of the premises, and you can agree with me and set me straight, but generally, one of the reasons you're trying to educate people about this is you believe cholesterol, our focus there, is a distraction from what the real cause of heart disease is. Is that right? And why do you believe
That's
that?
mostly right. I don't think it's irrelevant. I think sometimes people summarize the concept of the book by saying, oh yeah, cholesterol doesn't count and statins are bad.
Right.
It's not the summary of the book at all. And maybe, Mark, it might actually, I don't usually love to talk about my bio because it's a little narcissistic, but maybe talking a little bit about how I got into my career will inform us about why I asked these questions in the first place.
No, I want you to share that, because I think if you can humanize your experience, I think it's great.
It's kind of relevant. So when I started, it was, as I said, a second career for me. I was a professional musician.
Oh, that's pretty cool.
I started late. I became a trainer in my very, very early 40s. And when I became a trainer, the prevailing ethos was low-fat diets and calorie count. So everybody counted their calories, everybody ate a low-fat diet, and everybody joylessly exercised on that machine trying to burn enough calories, and we all know that story. And I was a true believer in that because I came new to the field. I had an unusual education. I came through I was educated in music. I had a master's in psychology. I just, I didn't really have a nutrition background or exercise physiology background. I learned everything through courses and whatever. And then I got certified as a personal trainer. So I'm drinking the Kool-Aid, man. Whatever they tell me, these are the experts, and I'm loving it. I fell in love with personal training and exercise and all of that stuff. I didn't really know much about nutrition. What I knew about nutrition is what trainers learned from the American Dietetic Association. They no longer call themselves the American Dietetic Association. They now call themselves the American Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics, but they're the same crappy, by the book. I can't say enough bad things about the American Dietetic Association, but I don't want to do that. The point is, they were the apologists for low-fat diets, calorie counting. Supplements aren't needed. You can get everything you need from food. I mean, they had talking points. They were like political talking heads on the cable shows. They came in. Those are their points. Don't tell them anything else. I know what I know, and that's it. And I believed it. I was 100% on board. The experts are telling me this. It's got to be true. I was so much of a believer. I was one of those guys that would order an egg white omelet, one of the dumbest ideas, the most boneheaded ideas in nutrition history, but we were all doing it. Egg white omelet, please. It would come with just a little bit of yolk, like a little yolk. I'd send it back. Why? Because I knew that if I ate that cholesterol, I'm dead. That's
right.
All right. So I want you to get how on board I was with this. So it's like 1991 Equinox opened in Manhattan, the very first club. And we are putting all of our clients on low-fat diets. We are putting them on that treadmill, and they are joylessly running, and they're doing step classes. And there's this woman, Susan Powder, who's on all of the infomercials going, stop the insanity. And the insanity was eating fat. We were total believers, man. And what would happen was this. Many of our clients did not get the results we thought they should be getting. And mea culpa to this, many of us have claimed the mea culpa on this one. We all thought they were lying. We thought they were cheating. We thought, oh, you're eating the low-fat diet and you're exercising 2 hours a day. Oh, they're lying to us, because they would definitely be losing weight if they did this. note the elite narcissism of that position. It's like, well, we can't be wrong, so they must be lying.
Yeah.
There's no sense of like, holy shit, maybe our advice is yes backwards. Is that possible? No, we're the experts. So around 1991, right around this time, Robert Atkins published the third edition of the Atkins Diet, which was called New Diet Revolution. That was the name of the book. It originally came out in 1972. There was a version, a second edition somewhere in there, and the third edition came out in 1991. So everybody's talking about Atkins. And we would have clients come in, I would have clients come in and they'd say, you know, I've been doing everything he's doing, doc, but I'm not losing weight. And my golfing buddy lost 40 pounds on Atkins. Or, you know, make your own story up. If my hairdresser is losing weight on Atkins, I'm going to try the Atkins diet. And this is what every one of the trainers at Equinox would say, including me. You cannot do that. He's a quack. That is the craziest. This is the guy that says that pork rinds are better than bread. You can't do that. You might lose a few pounds, but so do the models who are taking cocaine every morning. I mean, you might lose a few pounds. You're going to have a heart attack. You're going to die. Don't do it. Except they didn't listen. Imagine that. And I'm thinking of one guy in particular, but he's kind of a stand-in for the number of people I saw like this. He had been very heavy and he was really weight loss resistant. And he came in, and I won't say he was skinny, but significant weight loss. More importantly, his eyes are clearer. He has that look, you know it because all fitness professionals know it. You can kind of feel the health. You kind of, and I'm not talking granola, you know, airy-fairy, medical, intuitive stuff. I'm saying, you get a sense if somebody's healthy. You get a sense if somebody's got vitality and energy, and that had improved significantly. Not only that, he tells me, and of course at this time I know nothing about any of this stuff, but he said, my doctor says my blood pressure's down and my triglycerides have dropped and all this stuff, all, you know, good things. And I said, did you tell your doctor what you're doing? He said, yeah, I told him I'm doing the Atkins diet. He said, you can't do that. That was I wrote that in the introduction, I think, to the fourth edition. I wrote about how, you know, one of our clients had gone on this kind of a diet and gone to their doctor, and the doctor said, Mrs. Jones, these results are extraordinary. You have lost weight that you haven't been able to lose in ages. Your blood pressure is down. Your triglycerides are under 100. Your HDL is up. What the hell is going on? This is magnificent. And she said, oh, I'm on the Atkins diet. And they said, you can't do that. That's going to kill you. Right. That's the mentality that we were dealing with. So I asked some questions. And the first one I asked, one of these things has to be fake or false. You can't, either this guy standing in front of me who has lost 40 pounds and has lower blood pressure and better triglycerides and better blood lipids, either that's a illusion or what we were taught is bullshit. They can't both be true. It can't be true that the Atkins diet kills you and this guy's doing fantastic. So I began to ask myself, you know, what if some of this isn't true? What is the reason we've been told not to eat animal products? What is the reason we've been told not to eat saturated fat? If you looked at it, it was very clear that both of those instructions had been given for one reason. Because animal fat and you know, fat in general and animal raise cholesterol, and cholesterol causes heart disease. Case closed. Well, what if it didn't? Well, what if it wasn't quite that simple? Let's put it that way. Then what happens to the dietary guidelines? Remember, I'm only doing nutrition and personal training at this point, and so I'm not interested in the philosophy of medicine. I'm just going, well, if that's not true, then what happens to what we're supposed to be telling them to eat? Do we still have to tell them not to eat? I mean, and the answer is, if that isn't the case, then the dietary recommendations crumble like a house of cards. They're based on the premise of lowering cholesterol. That's how I got interested in cholesterol.
And I think that's what you mean by, because I think you do say in the book, it's a distraction. It's not that you dismiss it, and it's not that we shouldn't be conscious of these other things. It's that it is a distraction because sometimes I always, because of you, to be honest with you, let's cut the shit. It's, I think people make worse choices because they're doing exactly what you're saying. They're trying to eat foods specifically for cholesterol, not the healthiest actual foods.
100% true. And what we have been taught and what we've been conditioned to believe are the healthiest foods are very often, I would say 90%, utter and complete crap. We were raised on the fact that Cheerios is the breakfast, Wheaties is the breakfast of champions, and Cheerios is a health food. It's got the American Heart Association logo on it that they paid $3,000 for. It's got to be healthy. And we were taught, you don't want to eat saturated fat. You don't want to eat lard. You want to eat vegetable oil. You want to eat corn oil and safflower oil and sunflower oil. My nutrition mentor in 1990, Robert Crayon, the great nutritionist, he's dead now, said, he tongue in cheek said, if you ever want to kill somebody, I got the way you will never be caught. Sneak into their kitchen at night, take all the lard and the beef tallow and the saturated fats out and replace it with corn oil, safflower oil, sunflower oil, and cottonseed oil, and watch what happens.
Do you stay up on that research?
What?
Do you stay up on that research today even? Because I've seen even on the internet, some people debating that there's this one study out there that unsaturated fat, they were still basing it through the premise, though, what you're talking about is they're basing cardiovascular risk strictly through the premise of LDL cholesterol, which is just funny that's still happening.
This is a very important point you're making. A few years ago, the American Heart Association, not another organization I'm usually fond of, they had representatives from the AHA on the morning talk shows. And they were talking about things like coconut oil. It was a big push to get this. People were thinking coconut oil is healthy, and they were going to set the record straight with this. Every drop of research they showed, every single argument they made was not about coconut oil producing, people who ate a lot of coconut oil having endpoints like heart disease or strokes or early mortality. It was none of that. The single metric they used to make the case that coconut oil is bad for you was it raises cholesterol. And that was the end of the story. So it's
and
like,
that goes back to what you're saying, which is if you're seeing something through that paradigm, you can't ask the right questions.
So here's the proof. It raises cholesterol. So it obviously raises cardiovascular risk. And so, yeah, to get back to the thing where you said about the unsaturated fats, very often the case that they're making is based on it's based on this one metric, total cholesterol. And there's a very famous doctor in America, I'm sure you've heard of him, maybe some of the listeners haven't, Peter Attia. Dr. Peter wrote the best book ever written on anti-aging, which is called Outlive. I always plug other people's books on podcasts, but it's like the best book on anti-aging I've ever read. He says, don't take it from me, take it from Dr. Peter Attia, and his credentials are pretty impeccable. Total cholesterol is about as related to your risk for heart disease as your hair color. How about that? Now, that doesn't mean that LDL doesn't matter. I want to get into that because the tendency, as I said earlier, is to kind of summarize our points as being much more extreme than they are. Statins are always, I have people who come to me as private clients. I see a limited number of private clients for strategy consultations and, to do a lot of disinformation bunking and stuff like that. And they frequently will say, they were given statin drugs based on their total cholesterol, based, on a number that just does not matter. So I'm not saying these things are irrelevant variables. What I will say about cholesterol, just to start the discussion, is that we're measuring it wrong. The old-fashioned good and bad cholesterol test is obsolete, and it should have been retired years ago, except that our medical system is run by the insurance companies, and insurance companies won't pay for the correct test. But they got a $31 billion industry on selling statin drugs based on good and bad cholesterol. Any thinking critical thinker should be able to realize that the notion of good and bad is pretty simplistic.
Yeah, within the human body, like it doesn't have a purpose.
I mean, it is kind of almost like giving a medical diagnosis based on the variable of is he short or tall?
Right, right.
Short and tall are useful. The very, very, very tall people have certain risks that very, very short people don't, and vice versa. And it's something you want to know about. Well, you don't base a diagnosis on that. So in the olden days, we used to think good cholesterol and bad cholesterol. But cholesterol under a microscope, and even if you don't ever use a microscope, I'm telling you this, and it is the same cholesterol. There's no good cholesterol and bad cholesterol. There is cholesterol. It is the example I use that people get is I'm a passenger at the airport and I can choose to get on a plane to go to California on one hand, I can go visit you in Philadelphia on the other. It's the same passenger, dude. I didn't change my identity. I'm Jonny Bowden on the plane to California. I'm Jonny Bowden on the plane to visit Mark in Philadelphia. That's what cholesterol is. It shows up in two different containers. The containers are called lipoproteins. That's what we need to be looking at. The lipoproteins are the boat. The cholesterol is the cargo. I just realized that's not showing on my screen because I have a background. But basically, cholesterol is the cargo. Lipoproteins are the boat. Now, if you are a policeman and you are trying to prevent accidents on a very busy corner, what do you need to know about the cars? Let's think. Do I need to know what's in the glove compartment of the car? Not really. Do I need to know how many passengers are in the car? Not really. Do I need to know what's in the trunk? No. I need to know how many cars are on the road because that's what's going to predict accidents. The
Right, right.
more cars you have, the more likelihood, just statistically, if you're a bouncer in a bar, you could have the nicest crowd in the world. But the more people you have, the more likelihood someone spills a drink, somebody steps on somebody's toes, someone gets in somebody's face, and there's a fight. The newer, they're not even new, the correct cholesterol tests, the advanced lipid profiles, tell you how many boats are in the water. They don't just tell you how much cholesterol they're carrying. They tell you, and they're called particle tests because particle is a science name for LDL. So they're basically tests for how many LDLs you have in circulation. And they also look at the size of the LDLs. Why does that matter? Because big, fluffy LDLs don't do any harm. That small, nasty, inflamed ones do a lot of harm. So just knowing your LDL, it's useful, but it's not that useful. What's really useful is what kind is it? You know, cholesterol doesn't break down into good and bad. LDL actually breaks down into neutral or very bad. So we need to know that stuff. And we don't get any of that from the good and bad cholesterol test. So my number one takeaway here is you have to insist on getting a modern lipid profile, advanced lipid profile that every lab, Quest, LabCorp, they all give them. They call it,
Do some call them the NMR?
My best cardiologists that I work with kind of don't like that one as much as, say, the Boston Heart or the Cleveland Heart. So there are different. Yes, the NMR is one version. It's an old version, but the Cleveland Heart panel is probably a little bit better. The Boston, and they look at the number. And
If I could back up what you're saying, just to give an example for anyone listening to this, I had LDL because I do low carb and stuff that was slightly above the number they want. But then I did the particle test. What was funny is they said, hey, maybe you should consider, statin or something like that. But yet, if you look at the particles, my small, the type of particle type I had
very few
existed. So I'm like,
so you're pattern A, right, which means you're predominantly the good ones. Pattern B is predominantly the bad ones.
I'm like, so someone could have this super high level of the bad ones, and you would say nothing to them if they're 1 point under the number.
That's the example I've used for years. Exactly. You could have an LDL that's right there where the average Kaiser doctor says, you're fine, no problem. But 99% of them are the killer ones.
Right.
You could have one that's slightly elevated, but 99% of them don't do any damage. So you got to know this stuff.
What are some of the other things that are in that blood test or that you look for in blood work? Is there any other numbers to give you the context? I think you do mention, like, do you test for insulin or do you test for A1C? Or
I'm not an MD, so I can't prescribe these tests, but I tell all my clients, or I work with their doctor, and I tell them why it's so important. Insulin resistance is the metabolic plague of the 21st century. And it predicts heart disease 10 years before any of these things that we look at. 10 years before you walk into your doctor and your doctor says, "Oh, Mrs. Jones, cholesterol is getting a little high. Let's put you on a statin." 10 years earlier, you can see that happening with insulin resistance. And insulin resistance is treatable, preventable, reversible with diet, exercise, and fasting. You can turn that around and do you want to know what percentage of America has some degree of it? Would you like, if you don't happen to know this number,
It's that. I know it's high, but go ahead. It's
well, it used to be 88%. Last year, we would go 88% of us have some marker, not all of the 5 things for metabolic syndrome, insulin resistance, but like one, 2, or 3 of them. So it means that they're moving towards that. 88% of people. We used to say that all the time. And if you look to this day and say only 12% of America metabolically healthy, Science Daily will come up, all the research from University of North Carolina will come up, except that number is now obsolete. Would you like to know what it is now? 93.
wow.
We are dying. We're
I mean,
dying
but yeah.
of diabetes. And I consider all of these, and I wrote about this in the revised edition of The Great Cholesterol Myth, one big continuum: pre-diabetes, diabetes, obesity, heart disease, Alzheimer's, which they now call type 3 diabetes, because guess what's at the root of it? Insulin resistance. Cancer apparently has an insulin resistance component. All of the COVID comorbidities, except for socioeconomic class, education, and mental illness, all of them insulin resistance. Lung, kidney disease, all of the metabolic ones like diabetes, heart disease, obesity, all of them. So I think that testing for insulin, fasting insulin, is incredibly important. And there is LabCorp has a test called the LPIR. The IR stands for insulin resistance. It's basically a particle test plus an actual insulin resistance test that gives you a number. However, if you can get your doctor to just order a fasting insulin, you take that number and your fasting glucose, which is on every blood test ever given in the world, those 2 numbers, you feed it into a calculator online, and it'll tell you your insulin resistance score, just like the BMI does.
Oh,
You
awesome. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, you feed height and weight in, and it gives you your BMI. And so you can find your own insulin resistance score if you can get a fasting insulin. You want your fasting insulin low. Why? Because if you're not eating, what's it doing elevated? It comes out when you've eaten food and your blood sugar is high. When your blood sugar has been normalized, it's supposed to go back to sleep. It should be down around 1 or 2.
Right.
So if you have a very high fasting insulin, 15 or 20 or something like that, what's it doing elevated? You got a big problem. You are very insulin resistant. So,
Something's broken.
so I think that's an important marker. I think that inflammatory markers are very important. When we wrote the first edition of The Great Cholesterol Myth, we said that that oxidation and inflammation were the twin towers of metabolic destruction, that they basically were at the root of all heart disease and all these. And I don't know if they're the only things, but they certainly accompany or promote or make worse just about every chronic disease we know. So I like to look at inflammatory markers like CRP and homocysteine. And these give a picture of how inflamed a person is, how, if their particle number is very high and they're the wrong kind, they're the small kind, you have a situation, and you want to start to try to treat that.
And these tests really speak to context. And I think that's a big part of your book and what you teach, is that cholesterol or LDL can matter, but I need context to understand, and the particle type and the insulin levels, and look at the person as a whole to understand, does this cholesterol number matter or not? If you don't remember off the top of your head, it's all good. But in your book, you speak a lot to some of the misinformation that has made us so fearful and looking in the wrong places. The Framingham Heart Study, I believe, the Women's Nurse Initiative, is that what it is? The Lion Diet.
Yeah, the Framingham is a great study. It's still going on. I think it started decades ago, I think in the 1940s. And they basically follow the people of Framingham, Massachusetts, and they look at what their health outcomes are. What do they do? What are their numbers? What are their metrics? How does it wind up? There's a similar study, which maybe we'll get into much later on, called the happiness study. Also started in 1936. It's still going on now. It's in its fourth generation, fourth director. And they do the same thing. They took a population and they follow them forever. How many of them die? What do they do? How many of them live to 100? What did they do? And they just correlate and look for these variables. So the thing about the Framingham study is that the people with the highest cholesterol live the longest in defiance of every prediction that you might come up with. And there's probably a lot of reasons for that, but it was like, wait a minute, this doesn't make any sense at all. Cholesterol can be very protective. So, I mean, it isn't this monolithic thing that's always bad for you. We make it in our bodies. It's tightly controlled in the sense that, like, if you don't eat any cholesterol, your body will make more to make it up. You need it for your brain. I mean, you need it for something. You need it. I tell this to guys that makes them really pay attention because, you know, you can be talking about this stuff all day, but when you mention testosterone, they go, wait, tell me more. You make it out of cholesterol, dude. You make vitamin D out of cholesterol. You make your sex hormones out of cholesterol. You don't want your cholesterol at zero.
Right.
The funny thing about the curve with cholesterol is that it goes way up and if it goes way up, yes, there's some increased risk for things, but guess what happens when it goes way down? There's a huge increase in mortality from other things, accidents and suicides, for example. Why would that be? Because it affects your brain. You need cholesterol for the brain. So you get these people's cholesterol down to zero. What do you think is happening to their brain? So it's not that surprising that, you know, these things that are kind of related to that might go up when you have too low cholesterol. So these doctors who, let's get it as low, I want to see it down to zero. No, you don't.
Well, let me ask you brought up Peter Attia, and I'm a big fan of his. I read that book. I'm a huge fan of his. But the one thing that I would say that I personally disagree with, and who am I to disagree with Peter Attia? He wants to drive LDL as low as possible through statins.
And here's the thing. He is so smart. I would never debate Peter Attia. I mean, the guy, he's forgotten more about this shit than all. He's got brain power that is supernatural, and I just have very great respect for him. I think he's very aggressive about lipid lowering, and who knows, he might be right. I have a cardiologist friend who I think is one of the I don't want to do that. Oh, he's the best. You know, he's really at the top. He's one of the greatest cardiologists in the country. He's the head of the lipid department at Scripps Institute in California. And he's also very aggressive about lipid lowering, but not the way some of these knee-jerk guys are like, oh, your total cholesterol is 240. We need a statin. No. I mean, very thoughtful, looks at the particles, looks at the, you know, and there's enough data, you know, showing that really high numbers here increase risk for they're not crazy. I think that for the general public, we get so nuts about this and we're not even doing the right tests that I just don't want people that crazy about lowering LDL when they're not looking at any of the other factors that make us live long and healthy. They don't care about their sleep. They don't care about their relationships. They don't care about their social network. They just care about their LDL. That's a big mistake.
To Peter Attia, I don't like to bring that point up and like make a knock or anything, but he also will say in conjunction with that the lowest dose of most statins gives you 85% of the benefit, and anything above that is not worth the risk.
But you know what? I like that. You know,
yeah,
I'm always explaining to people when they say, you know, I read your book and I won't go to your statin. No, we didn't say that. You know, there's a lot of cases where 5 milligrams of cholesterol is a decent addition to a regime. If you've got a certain risk profile and you got a doctor like Peter Attia or Douglas Triffon at Scripps, and they're saying, you know, looking at this chart, and I mean, they do the math, they don't even pay attention to they're extrapolating from some of the most sophisticated research, and they're up on all of it. And they say, I think that maybe 5 milligrams, I would do it. And I've been like, sort of like, not so fast on the statins, but when I get it recommended by somebody like that, I would take a second look. I'm not opposed to, even Steve Sinatra, who wrote the book, would occasionally recommend them.
But he said in that book, I believe it was, his experience from his background, that he was looking internally at people and seeing that half the people that he saw had high LDL and had heart issues, but the other half were super healthy, and vice versa. Some people would have low and some people have high. And I think some of the other things you point out in the book is uh, there's a little bit of some other ulterior motive to why some
You
of
have
this
very weird
is released.
incentives in the medicine in the medicine industrial complex. The incentives for chicanery and profit making, they would corrupt almost anybody. I mean, you take people have my psychology background comes in handy here because I actually know this stuff from my master's in psychology, but people want to believe the best about themselves. They don't want to feel like, the drug companies aren't sitting there like Dick Cheney in the Energy Commission, like, okay, how can we put one over them? They're not doing that. They really believe they're helping people. They really do, but it's a profit motive thing, and they're responsible to their shareholders, and they would like to believe that they're doing great good, and there's a lot of people who think that they are and stuff. But the fact is that we're very perversely incentivized for things like getting everybody vaccinated and getting everybody on a statin. I mean, the incentives are just, it's hard to separate how much of that is really good advice from how much of that is like, I mean, any of us, if I said to you, there are two choices here and they're both good, but you're going to make $1 million if you make choice A, and you're not going to make any money if you do choice B. All of a sudden, they don't seem so equal. All of a sudden, you come up with a lot of reasons why choice A is really kind of a better choice, isn't it? So we're just perversely incentivized.
You have a great quote. Don't you have a great quote about someone can't see truth or something if their income's tied to it or something? There was some quote you have.
That is one of the greatest quotes in the world, and it is by H.L. Mencken, the American writer, who said it is very difficult. Oh, sorry, Sinclair Lewis. Sinclair Lewis said it is difficult to get a man to change his opinion if his salary depends on holding that opinion.
And I think to your point too, this isn't about bashing someone. Modern medicine is phenomenal. And like you said, these people that are working, because I actually have people sometimes I'll post stuff and they will get offended because they work for a pharmaceutical company or they feel judged because they're on the pharmaceutical drug. And that's never what the message is. I think
Yeah.
the thing that would bother maybe someone like you or even myself isn't that it's that it's become the go-to and it's become the thing, the default, and it's become the thing that's getting all the attention rather than what really could be so powerful.
I couldn't agree more. I couldn't agree more. And when you mentioned that quote that we had in the book about it's caused us to take our eye off the ball. So what is the ball? Eating real food, seriously good real food. And by real food,
For you? What's real food for you? Because some people can't tell the difference.
oh, I
So
know. I spend a lot of time with people trying to answer that question. They go, well, I'm not even sure what it is. So my first advice to them is if you're not sure if it's real, it's probably not.
right.
Nobody is confused about an apple.
Right.
Nobody's confused about a steak. Kale chips, you know? So real food is, to me, food that you could have hunted, fished, gathered, or plucked. If you were naked on the African Serengeti with a sharp stick, what would you eat? Because it's probably good for you.
What do you do in your own life? What's your day look like food wise over the years?
I tend to fast till noon at least, maybe 1 o'clock on most days, some days even longer. I play tennis on an ordinary day, 2 hours, 1 hour and a half to 2 hours a day, 5 to 7 days a week,
Oh,
sometimes
cool. Okay.
I play 6 or 7 times a week. And I do it the morning tennis on an empty stomach with black coffee
Okay.
with, cream, half and half, something like that. Um, and I have the first meal around 12 or 1 o'clock. And I try to incorporate the best lessons from intermittent fasting that the average person can use without becoming necessarily an intermittent faster and getting into all the schedules. And that's great. I'm a big proponent of that. I used to teach a course called Meta Fasting where we went into all the different fasting schedules. But if an ordinary person wants to learn the best that has to offer, you can just take a couple of basic principles. Find a window during which you eat. 12 to 8 is the popular one. It can be anything, but find a window. Don't eat the rest of the day, right? And in that window, here's where the rubber meets the road. A lot of people go, okay, I can eat from 12 to 8. I can eat anything I want, as much as I want, all day long. And the truth is that 16 hours of fasting will have some benefit anyway. I mean, even if you're eating the 8 hours you're spending the whole time in McDonald's, I mean, you could undo the good of it, but it does do a lot of good to give you that 16 hours. But you can get much more benefit if you obey these couple of general guidelines. 4 hours between meals, even within the 8 hour window. 4 hours, I'll settle for 3, no less, between meals. You don't eat after the last meal, and you don't snack between meals.
Do you have 2 or 3 big meals in your
It's
own
hard
life?
to get it's
Is it
hard to
different
get
each
three
day?
in a 12-hour thing and still leave 3 in between. But I guess if you ate at 12, 3, and 6, you could.
Okay. And then do
I
you have
don't
any?
have 3 meals, to tell you the truth. I mean, I'm very full on 2, but okay. One meal a day, Mark, strangely enough, doesn't seem to work as well. There is a 1 meal a day fasting plan. And there are people on TikTok, you'll hear me, oh, I lost all the it tends to not work as well long term. That's what Jason Fong and the fasting people up in Canada. That Jason Fong is the father of intermittent fasting. He wrote the book on intermittent. He's just
He wrote
great.
Obesity Code as well, correct?
Oh, and the Cancer Code. He's
Yep.
one of the top. Um, they find, number one, that it's hard to get all of the nutrients you need and all the protein in one meal. That would be 100 grams of protein in one meal, or 90 grams of protein in one meal. So you're going to wind up being short on that. There's just a number of reasons why it just doesn't translate to weight loss in the same way. It may have health benefits, I don't know, but I would prefer at least 2 meals a day, or even 3. Now, you can do this without intermittent fasting. You can do the old-fashioned 1950s way of eating. You don't eat after dinner. There's no snacking and TV. You get up in the morning, you have breakfast. There's a 4 hour wait. You have lunch 12, 1 o'clock, 4 hour wait. Dinner 5, 6 o'clock. End of day. So you're not even really, they call it in the fasting world, they call that a 12 and 12. Because you're basically eating from 6 in the morning to 6 at night, and you're sleeping from, 8 at night to 8 in the morning. So that's a 12 and 12 intermittent fast. It's the best way to introduce the notion of intermittent fasting to people who are constantly snacking and eating in the car and
Bringing awareness to their behaviors.
right. But that's the way people used to eat in the 50s, and it ain't bad.
Before
Not a
snacking.
bad way. I think that people who are really more interested in biohacking the best they can get from their health would be well advised to try a more limited period than 12 hours. Try 8 hours and see if you can get 2 or 3 meals in there, and not too big, and if you choose the right foods, you'd be amazed at how little you can eat and feel full.
It's funny you brought up the OMAD, or the 1 meal a day, and my wife and I did an experiment for a month. I always do personal experiments where
Like that. That's good. Tell me.
I did alternating day fasting,
Okay.
and she did OMAD, 1 meal a day. Now, both of us are very lean and already have good habits, and obviously live and practice this lifestyle. We did body scans, and what we found was, for her, she lost a lot of muscle because she's already lean, very active, and was struggling with what you said, probably struggling to squeeze in enough protein, squeezing in enough nutrients to where she did lose weight. She looked ripped, but a lot of it was muscle, much higher percentage.
So
Me
this
personally, I didn't like the behavior of the OMAD because I felt like it made me fixated on food by skipping a day, and made me gorge because I knew I couldn't eat the next day when I already had good routines. Whereas I do know some people who just have true problems eating. OMAD or alternate day fasting did work for them.
I mean, all of these things have a place, and you're 100% right. Experiment. Everybody, one of the principles of functional medicine is everybody's different. There's no
Yeah,
universal
yes.
diet that's good for everybody except the eat real food diet.
Right.
You
Yeah, and
know,
I think it's too, people are different. If they have a lot of weight to lose versus if they're already really lean, people will
yes.
respond differently.
And since you brought up weight loss, which is probably one of the main
Yeah,
reasons
it's
come to you, and certainly the main reason people have always come to me, and the main reason people go to the gym and all of that other stuff. We'd love to think I want to be healthy and play with my grandkids, but really I want to have this 8-pack. So
right.
I mean that's a big motivation. So when we're talking about weight loss, let's talk about one of the biggest pitfalls of weight loss, and we're seeing this so clearly with Ozempic. they lose a lot of muscle. And what happens when you do that? Well, first of all, muscle we now know is the organ of longevity. Healthy muscles, healthy life. Done. We didn't know that when I started out as a trainer. It's way more important than we thought. It's not just about having big guns and, looking
Right.
good at the beach. I mean, that is, as Peter Attia says, what's one of the biggest risks for death? Frailty. What's frailty? You ain't got no muscle.
Right.
Picture a frail person. Do you see biceps? No. You see weakness and thin bones so muscle loss is a serious. There's even a medical condition called sarcopenia, which is age-related loss of muscle. It's very serious. And when you do these weight loss programs, including Ozempic, especially Ozempic, but really, as you found out, even a month of OMAD or something like that, oh, she lost a ton of weight, but 50% of it was her muscle. You can't do that.
Right.
So that's a very big danger with all weight loss programs. And I think it's one that people are not enough aware of. They don't do enough to preserve. Certainly the people who are going on the GLP-1 and agonist drugs aren't being told you got to work out. You have got to preserve that muscle because it's going to disappear along with your fat.
Yeah, I think I saw a video of you saying about, I don't know if you use these words, but generally it was this concept of it's an investment and you want to build up a reserve so you have as much as possible for your future, because I think people always look at themselves in their 40s and 50s and think they're fine, and they don't realize it's degrading over time. And if they stay on this pace, it's going to be bad.
Going to be bad. Exactly right. And so going back to that keep your eye on the ball thing, I mean, I wanted to talk about a few things that are not covered in the cholesterol universe. We're talking about things like sleep. So, when in the 90s, Wolf of Wall Street days, when everybody, there used to be this saying, oh, I'll sleep when I'm dead. These big, movers and shakers, they were idiots.
Right.
You'll be dead a lot faster if you don't sleep, dude. So we are just beginning, not just beginning, we've actually known for a while, but I think the public is just beginning to become aware of how important sleep is, not just for weight, for mental health, for stress management, for resilience, for brain health. It's just the list is endless when you are not sleeping well. And I can't recommend highly enough, a wearable like the Oura Ring, where you can actually dial in and see how many minutes you spent in deep sleep or REM or light sleeps. I mean, it tells you the stages that the deep sleep apparently has quite a relationship to dementia, because the people who get the least deep sleep seem to have the most tangles and plaque in the brain on autopsy, and those are characteristic of Alzheimer's, are very associated with Alzheimer's. So, sleep affects your weight, it affects your vitality, your energy, all of these metrics that matter so much, and especially weight. And here's the mechanism. When you don't sleep, the body sees it as a stressor. When the body is stressed, it releases cortisol. Cortisol puts on weight on the middle, and it also burns up muscle. So there's huge metabolic effects of not sleeping enough, something nobody talks about when they're talking about lowering. I'm not saying, again, that the cholesterol stuff's not important. I'm saying let's back up and do a little bit of a helicopter look and see what else is going on here. So yeah, you got your blood lipids on the one hand, you got your sleep. How about sunlight? How about exposure to greenery? There's a whole field of psychotherapy. It's been around for 20 years. This is not like I just made this up, some cool new thing that happened in Venice Beach. Ecotherapy, 20 years research on ecotherapy, which basically is about the healing qualities of being in greenery and being in nature. They have found in studies that if you're in a hospital room that has a view of the grass, you have better blood metrics and less doctor visits and faster recovery time. Relationships. Every study, from the blue zones to the happiness study to the Rossetto phenomenon, has shown that the major predictor of long life and a healthy life is your social network. Every time I do a session with my clients, I usually do one session only. I'm not one of those dietitians that, I don't look at food diaries. In 1 hour, we are concentrating on you, your life, and your strategy going forward. We get rid of the misinformation. We correct a lot of that. And we then do the helicopter picture. And every one of them, after they bring me the test and they tell me all the things that they're worried about, then now I'm going to tell you the most important thing. And I ask them, you have kids? Do you have a partner, a wife, a husband? Do you have dogs? Do you have pets? And we start to talk about their life. And sometimes they get very animated. Oh God, my kid, yeah, I love them. Oh, and then all the stress goes out of their face. And then now they're talking about the things that make them happy, going fishing with that, whatever it is. I mean, it's a wide variety of things, but things that light people up, things that get them inspired and make them feel like they have a sense of purpose. And I said, okay, health is like, and this is a good place to end because it really summarizes, at least for me, summarizes everything I believe. So health is like a bank account. You make withdrawals and you make deposits. Most people are very concerned with the withdrawals. They have bad test results. They didn't sleep enough. They did an all-nighter and they're metabolically, all screwed up for a day or two. And those are withdrawals. But that stuff that lights you up, that stuff that inspires you, that stuff that gets you out of bed in the morning, the stuff that happens in your eyes when you talk about the person you love or your partner or your kids or your grandmother or whoever or whatever that does that, those are the biggest deposits you can make in that bank account. They predict your life, the quality of life, your freedom from disease, all of those things you're concerned about. That's what's being predicted by a life that's filled with other people and other relationships and giving and gratitude and involvement and engagement with other people. That's the secret weapon. And that's the one nobody's talking about because you can't sell medicine for it and you can't sell programs for it. It's a really simple solution to anybody's, if somebody says, I don't have any friends, good, make some. Well, I don't really have any contact. Good, volunteer. Well, I don't really have anything good. Go do some good deeds that nobody knows about. Put money in somebody's meter. Just watch what happens.
Now, some of this tied to that happiness study you referenced, because I never heard of this
Yes,
happiness study.
yes. Oh, look it up. Look it
Okay.
up. The
Yeah, I never
happiness.
heard of that one.
4 generations.
So you'll build this into if you're working with somebody, a big part of you will be.
Huge part. A huge part.
That's interesting. Yeah, and I think that gets to your point in all of your books and the things that you highlight, which is treating the person as a whole, looking at this context, and we are so much more than a number or these things. There's a bigger picture to be told and more things to be done as interventions that can truly help heal a person, whether it's to lose weight or heal them from the inside out. But
100%, Mark, you get it. You totally get it.
where could what else you got? I do have one question for you. And I
Yeah.
know you go. What have you changed your mind on over the last 20, 40 years in it since
Oh,
what's the
that's an hour question.
we won high level one? Do you have anything high level? What's that?
Politics? No. Um, I don't think I've changed my mind on core value stuff. I think I've softened my ferocity and attachment to certain methods and certain ways to accomplish these things. And it's got to be this way, and it's got to be that diet, and it's got to be this political. I think that I've gained a perspective. What's changed so much is not so much my opinion on a specific thing, like how much cardio you should do,
Right.
but rather how important the context and the whole is. Even with foods, it's like, what's the pattern of eating? Not how many blueberries do you eat. What's the pattern? Is it mostly dark fruits and vegetables and good grass-fed meat, or is it mostly McDonald's? What's the pattern? One meal at McDonald's won't kill anybody, and one grass-fed steak won't make anybody healthy. What is the pattern? What do you do most of the time? And I think the biggest change has been that I've realized that people are so multifaceted and so complex. You won't ever really find somebody who agrees 100% with you on anything. Not whether it's political, whether it's food, whether it's supplements. I mean, I've talked to some of the smartest people and incredible people that I'm going, I agree with everything. I agree with everything. And they say, you know what? You don't really need supplements. And I go, I agree with that. So, but I've gotten so much more, I don't want to say tolerant, but understanding of the complexity of people's feelings and emotions and thoughts about things and ideas and beliefs, and that they come in different packages. And a person who agrees with you on this and that you feel comrade, oh, brother, you're my brother on this one. On this one, maybe not so much. And that's okay. You know, I was a lifelong, all right, I don't want to get deeply into politics, but I was a lifelong New York Democrat progressive. I'm upper middle class Jewish, raised in New York City. I mean, what am I going to be?
Right.
Lifelong of that. And up to everything changed during the pandemic. I got a lot of eyes open during that time. But 5 years ago, it said this guy's a MAGA hat wearing Republican Trump guy, and I would go, I had everything I needed to know about them, and they are the other. And now, not only do I have some friends in that camp, but one of the people I would want at my deathbed. I mean, one of the people that I feel the most just spiritual affinity with, one of the kindest, most generous, most spiritually evolved people I know. He's a born-again Christian, home raises his kids, gun owner, Trump voter, Republican. And I love him. And the point is, people are a little more complex than you realize. And you look under the hood and you start to look for things that you have in common. And you start to look for, like, what do we agree on? How far apart are we really? How much is this tribalism and just you're on the wrong team? And how much of it is, how about let's ask some questions here. What do we agree on? What are you really about? And you just find so many ways to connect with people that you would have dismissed if you were in that old school mentality. This is good, that's bad. And I saw it even with foods. Are bananas good or bad? Or spaghetti good or bad? And nothing's good or bad, except maybe Mother Teresa and Jeffrey Dahmer. Everybody else is in between. So extremes. So we got to learn to live and accept a little bit more. And I think that's where I've changed my mind, not in the sense of like I've moved from this belief to that, but in the sense of broadening and expanding, the space that you have for other people and for other ideas and things like that.
Yeah, I think that's beautifully put. And I think the one commonality we can find is we're all struggling with the same desires and fears and insecurities, and they're motivating us, and it manifests in different way. But
100%.
ultimately, I think we can all relate to each other in that way. I did not intend the talk to go that direction, but I think it speaks to you almost seem to have a spiritual connection to the person and to even to food. And sometimes I tell people when they really die on their food, it's almost spiritual because of how they feel. And
Yes.
So
I'm with you on that. I'm with you on that 100%. Well, I don't think we're alone in having made that discovery.
Well, I appreciate your insights, your perspective. As I said to you, from afar, you've been a mentor of mine.
So kind of you to say, and it really means a lot to me. Don't think that I just, and people tell me that or write a letter and tell me that, and I had no idea, and I've affected somebody that way. That's my purpose, and that makes me feel fantastic. So thank you for sharing that.
We have a nutrition program that's built on some of the principles you've taught me, and over 2,500 people have done that, written me amazing letters, and a lot of it's come from that inspiration of you writing a book. And
thank you, man.
More people that do it, you inspire someone else to do it, they should do it too, because there's never enough of spreading the good things and the right ideas. So
thank you.
For your time.
And if people want to reach me, it's JonnyBowden.com, JONNYBOWDN. And if you so moved or you're interested in maybe what it would be like to work with me, there's a little bit 2-minute video telling you like what I do, and you can actually sign up and book a session right there if you want to.
No, people should work with you. People should read your books, and they should also follow you on Instagram. You have great content, short clips that are very informative. So I'll be taking some of these and posting them as well. So thank you so much. This is really cool.
Great. Take care, man. Bye-bye.
Appreciate it.